Recently, China made a big move in the military industry. A massive airship, 150 meters long, that is said to float up to 20 kilometers high. It claims to be able to track American F-35 stealth fighters from 2,000 kilometers away, and even the latest B-21 bomber couldn't be able to escape. They're calling it the stealth killer. At the same time, Chinese media is hyping up the so-called sixth-generation fighter jet like it's about to leave the US military in the dust. But is any of that actually true? Let's break it down and see if these military headlines are real breakthroughs or just flashy propaganda. China's Changchun Institute of Optics, Fine Mechanics and Physics claims this airship detects jets using infrared sensors that pick up heat from their engines. Its core tech includes a cadmium telluride mercury detector and a 300mm telescope, tuned to a 2.8 to 4.3 micron wavelength range to minimize atmospheric interference. Sounds cutting edge, right? They also say it has signal-enhancing algorithms to amplify weak signals and filter out noise, making it seem like some next-level black technology, but reality has a way of bringing things back down to earth. First problem, infrared signals weaken when passing through clouds, moisture, or dust storms. When Chinese experts admit that if there's cloud cover, the detection range gets cut in half. It might work under clear skies, but what about fog, rain, or smog? In these conditions, it won't find stealth jets at all. Second problem, the telescope. A 300mm lens trying to spot a jet's exhaust 2,000 kilometers away is like standing in Beijing with a magnifying glass and trying to see a fly on a street in Shanghai. Even the best physics teacher would laugh at that idea. Optical resolution has its limits. No amount of fancy algorithms can change that. Third problem, the airship itself is a slow-moving target. It's 150 meters long, but only travels at 120 kilometers per hour. Western experts joke that it wouldn't last through a single meal in a war. A missile would turn it into fireworks in seconds. Lastly, surveillance coverage is limited. The telescope can only scan a small portion of the sky, meaning dozens of airships would be needed to monitor a large airspace. The cost and logistics would be overwhelming. In reality, airship surveillance isn't a new concept. During World War II, airships were used for reconnaissance, but once radar was developed, they became obsolete. China is bringing back an old idea with a high-tech makeover. It's a romantic notion, but in practical terms, it's more of a showpiece than a real stealth killer. There are some interesting technological aspects, but it's nowhere near the game-changer they're claiming it to be. At the end of 2024, two new fighter jets from Chengdu and Shenyang aircraft corporations made a big splash, and Chinese media went into overdrive, calling them sixth-generation fighters and suggesting they had already surpassed the US and Europe. Sounds exciting, right? But here's the catch. No one even knows what a sixth-generation fighter actually is. 50 years ago, military theorists first imagined the era of low-altitude, high-maneuverability combat. Once the concept was solidified, aircraft like the F-15, F-16, Su-27, and Su-35 were developed based on that vision. Later, the idea of stealth warfare took hold, leading to the creation of stealth jets, the fifth-generation fighters we have today. The same process applies to sixth-generation jets. There needs to be a clear, well-defined theory of how future air combat will work before actual planes can be designed. Right now, that theory doesn't exist. Fifth-generation fighter jets dominate fourth-generation ones because of their stealth capabilities. So what groundbreaking feature does a sixth-generation jet need? The US is still exploring this question in labs, yet China claims to be ahead. The idea of a sixth-generation jet that Chinese nationalists fantasize about is just a mix of existing technologies, stealth, high speed, high-altitude capabilities, and some spaceflight potential, maybe even low-altitude maneuverability. But these are all rehashed ideas, not a vision for the future. No one actually knows what sixth-generation air combat will look like, what kind of jets will be needed, or what functions they should serve. Without a clear theory, there's no way to build a true sixth-generation fighter. For comparison, the F-22 and F-35, as fifth-generation jets, have an overwhelming advantage over fourth-generation ones like the F-15 and F-16, sometimes outmatching them by dozens of times. That's a generational gap. Now, can the new planes from Chengdu and Shenyang aircraft corporations dominate the J-20 or F-35 at the same level? Absolutely not. These new jets are just enhanced versions of stealth technology, more advanced than the J-20 and J-35, but still within the realm of fifth-generation improvements. Chengdu's design follows a flying wing layout, removing vertical tails and canards while packing in 3 engines. Sure, it improves stealth, but it's just an upgraded version of existing stealth tech, like calling an iPhone 14 Plus an iPhone 20. It's still far from a breakthrough. Some Chinese media even claim that this Chengdu jet can reach speeds of Mach 5 or 6. That's just treating the audience like fools. Because, first, the wide, flat shape of a flying wing design is inherently unsuitable for hypersonic speeds. To go that fast, a jet needs to be sleek and aero-like to minimize drag, but a flying wing setup has massive air resistance. Second, stealth and hypersonic speeds don't mix. High-speed flight requires friction, generating intense heat and boosting infrared emissions, which completely negate stealth. Just look at the US B-2 and B-21 bombers. They all stick to subsonic speeds for a reason. So the idea of a hypersonic stealth fighter contradicts itself. On top of that, Chinese fighter jet specifications are often overhyped online, only for reality to cut them down later. For example, before the J-20's official specs were released, the internet was filled with claims that it could reach Mach 3. When the actual numbers came out, it was only Mach 2. Similarly, the internet estimates its range at over 5,000 kilometers, but the official classification is just medium to long range. Meanwhile, the J-15, which has a max range of 3,000 kilometers, is labeled as a long-range jet, implying the J-20's range is actually less than that. In other words, if someone claims that this new Chengdu jet can fly at Mach 5 or 6, the real number is probably closer to Mach 3 at best. As for Shenyang's so-called 6th-generation jet, its design is completely different from Chengdu's flying wing approach. At least Chengdu's model leans into stealth, but Shenyang's version has a diamond-shaped delta wing, a bulky fuselage, and engines mounted on top. It looks like a hybrid between a medium-sized fighter and an unmanned combat drone, but it's nowhere near the scale or capabilities of a true 6th-generation fighter. With such a disorganized design approach, it's clear this jet is nowhere near ready. According to a report from The Drive, satellite images show that this aircraft is about 15 meters long with a decent wingspan, but overall it looks more like a technology demonstrator, or possibly even a deliberate decoy to mislead foreign intelligence agencies. In other words, this is just a concept model or scaled-down prototype. It's nowhere close to being combat-ready. The bottom line, the new jets from Chengdu and Shenyang are just stealth-enhanced 5th-generation fighters dressed up as 6th generation for hype. If China wants to convince the world, they need solid theories, real data, and actual performance in combat. Otherwise, their so-called 6th-generation fighter is all show and no substance. In recent years, China's military media has been aggressively promoting its fighter jets, making it seem like they're selling like hotcakes. Iran wants in, then Argentina, Egypt, and Serbia all line up, especially Saudi Arabia. Every time Chinese internet rumors pop up, Saudi Arabia is always included, as if the story wouldn't feel complete without them. However, this wave of hype was quickly shut down by China's own government. At a Ministry of National Defense press conference on February 27th, a reporter asked whether Egypt had received its first batch of Chinese J-10CE fighter jets. In response, Defense Ministry spokesperson Wu Qian stated that the claim was completely false. With that, the flood of reports about Egypt's purchase was exposed as nothing more than a baseless rumor. In reality, Chinese-designed fighter jets have had a very underwhelming performance in the international market. Aside from Pakistan buying a batch of J-10E jets, almost no other country has purchased China's mainline fighter jets. Another jet that's been hyped up online is the JF-17, making it seem like it's selling worldwide. But the reality is that so far, only Myanmar, Nigeria, and Azerbaijan have bought them, and together they've purchased fewer than 20 units. They're all relatively poor countries. More importantly, the JF-17 isn't even a purely Chinese aircraft. All three buyers signed contracts with Pakistan, not China. The final assembly line for the JF-17 is also located in Pakistan. In fact, the JF-17 isn't just a China-Pakistan joint project. It's actually a collaboration between China, Pakistan, and Russia. Pakistan holds the largest stake and effectively acts as the chairman of the project. The jet's engine and cannon come from Russia, meaning it can only be exported with Russia's approval, and Russia also gets a share of the profits. The radar system is from Italy, and the ejection seat is from the UK. These are the most valuable components of the aircraft. After factoring in costs, Pakistan takes the largest portion of the profits, leaving China with barely anything. Yet, whenever Chinese media talks about the JF-17 and Pakistan, they act like they've struck gold. Selling Chinese fighter jets is much harder than some people imagine. The US obviously won't buy them, and neither will its allies, who account for 85% of the global market. Some Chinese nationalists still fantasize about Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, and Qatar buying Chinese J-10E jets, but these countries are staunch U.S. allies and prefer American fighter jets. That alone removes another 5% of the market. Russia won't buy Chinese jets either, and neither will its closest allies, North Korea, Belarus, and the Central Asian states, cutting out another 5% of the market. Then there are neighboring countries like India and Vietnam, which have territorial disputes with China. They wouldn't buy Chinese fighter jets either, reducing the market share by another 2%. That leaves just 3% of the market. Some people still dream that countries like Serbia and Iran, which have close ties with China, might be potential buyers. But over the past 30 to 40 years, Iran has always chosen Russian fighter jets over Chinese ones. Serbia, despite its tensions with the US, turned to France and brought Rafale jets instead. When Russia was in a stronger position, Serbia bought Russian jets. It has never once considered purchasing Chinese fighters. If you remove these countries from the equation, all that's left are small, economically weak nations. And even among those, some lead toward the US, others favor Europe, and some align with Russia. After filtering them out, China is left with just 1% of the global market for fighter jets. So where do these false stories come from? Many of these rumors stem from misinterpretations or exaggerations of official statements. Take Sudan, for example. When the Sudanese Ministry of Defense issued a vague statement about acquiring new fighter jets, Chinese military bloggers immediately claimed Sudan was buying Chinese jets and that deliveries were imminent. This completely fabricated news spread widely across the internet, got repeated and amplified, and eventually became a fact in the minds of many Chinese people, only to be later debunked as entirely false. The spread of these false stories usually follows a pattern. First, a foreign official makes a vague or diplomatic statement. Next, Chinese social media interprets it as a clear sign of interest in Chinese weapons. Next, different platforms cite each other, creating an information echo chamber. Finally, these news reports are packaged as proof that the world widely recognizes China's military strength. The gap between this propaganda and reality is especially clear in the case of the 052D destroyer. China has built 38 of these modern warships, often known as the Chinese Aegis. However, even Pakistan, traditionally a major buyer of Chinese weapons, didn't want them. In its latest frigate project, Pakistan chose the European missile defense system Albatros N from MBDA instead of the HQ-16 system used on 052D. The reason? The HQ-16 missile is more than 3 times heavier than the CAM-ER missile, but has almost the same range. A vertical launch cell the size of an HQ-16 launcher could fit 4 CAM-ER missiles instead. The 346A phased array radar on the 052D has been exaggerated as being comparable to the US Spy-1 radar, but military experts point out significant gaps in detection capability and reliability. Meanwhile, Morocco and Egypt have purchased FREM frigates from France and Italy, and Saudi Arabia has also signed a deal for a new version of the FREM. Chinese military bloggers once confidently claimed that Saudi Arabia was about to buy 12 of the 052D destroyers, but the oil-rich kingdom has shown no interest in Chinese warships at all. China allows this exaggerated military propaganda for a reason. It helps create an illusion of technological advancement to boost national pride, while also signaling to the world that China's military is rising and Western dominance is declining. China's recent high-profile weapon showcases are closely tied to the shifts in international dynamics following the Trump administration. If the U.S. tries to contain the Taiwan issue as a localized conflict, China is signaling that it won't play by Washington's rules. Instead, it's preparing for a full-scale confrontation. This posture is meant to make the U.S. reconsider the costs of intervening in Taiwan, serving as a strategic deterrent. At the same time, an article from Chinese state media Xinhua believes it has an industrial manufacturing advantage over the U.S. By heavily promoting its military capabilities now, China hopes to push the U.S. into diverting significant resources toward manufacturing, leaving it with less focus on other areas. China is also engaging in psychological warfare. With flashy demonstrations of sixth-generation fighters and other high-tech weapons, it's creating uncertainty. Are these advancements just hype, or are they truly a Sputnik moment? The U.S. government has remained silent, and this ambiguity is exactly what China wants, to keep Washington guessing about its actual capabilities. That said, China's military propaganda shouldn't be dismissed entirely. In areas like anti-stealth technology and unmanned systems, China is making real progress. While these advancements might not be as revolutionary as advertised, they're still capable of shifting the regional military balance, particularly in the Taiwan Strait. However, the Chinese Communist Party's claims about its military strength should not be overestimated either. The West should allocate resources based on its own strategic needs rather than reacting to China's propaganda cycle. This ensures sustainable and targeted technological development rather than getting pulled into an unnecessary arms race. The key is to accurately assess China's actual capabilities and strategic intentions and craft a balanced response accordingly. In this global competition shaping the 21st century, the ability to discern information and maintain strategic clarity is crucial. Overreacting or being caught off guard could both be costly mistakes. Understanding the true nature of China's military propaganda is the first step to staying clear-headed.